next challenge is entitled, Is the Number Symmetrical? Create a function that takes a number as an argument and returns true or false depending on whether the number is symmetrical or not. A number is symmetrical when it is the same as its reverse. That sounds kind of familiar, right? So look at the examples. We see 7227 is true because the 72 matches, if you go from the end, 7, 2, right? It's like, do you remember when we did palindromes? It's this same spelling forward and backwards. It's the same concept here, but with numbers, and that's sort of a hint, right? You could actually, for one solution, you could convert the integer to a string, and then if you had your palindrome solution, you could simply run that on the string, and there's your result right there. So it's a good example of how you can leverage code you've written before and solve similar problems, or in some cases, increasingly more complex problems. Anyway, you'll notice the second example is false. I mean, right out of the gates, 1 is not equal to 7, so false. Symmetrical, all fours, yeah, for sure that's symmetrical. The second one differs in the second character. This 9 is not equal to the 3, the second character from the end. So we would say false there. And then true for the final example. You got 3 1s, a 2, and then 3 more 1s. So yeah, I think we're good there. And you could note with the symmetry that if you have an odd number of digits, it doesn't really matter what the middle one is, right? You're comparing all of them. That middle one's going to land in the same place in the reverse order. So that's something I think that we can leverage. Go over to code. As usual, please pause and solve this yourself or make an honest effort. Now we'll begin. I'm going to convert the input to a string first. Call it num text equals num. We know we have this toString method that will take care of that. And then basically my idea is going to be, I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I handled the palindrome thing. So I'm going to make a for loop, and I'm going to index halfway through the string, with the idea being that at each stage I'll start with the first index, let's say index 0. I'm going to take index 0 with respect to the front, I'm going to take index 0 with respect to the back. I'm going to compare those values. If they differ, I'm going to sort of short circuit out and say false. There's no need for me to continue processing values, and so we get out quick that way, and I like that. Because I'm doing that, I only need to search half of the size of the input, right? It would be redundant if I kept going past that halfway point. I'd be comparing these numbers against themselves again. So there's no need to do that. We can do, well, I'll get back to the code. So since we can do half, I'll say int, let's call it num compares equals num text, length. We know string has a length property. I'm going to divide by 2, and this will work out in the case where num has an even or odd number of digits. With integer division, you get truncation. So let's say the input size was 9. If I divide that by 2, we know it's 4.5, but because this is an integer and it doesn't hold halves, it will truncate that decimal part, and the answer will be 4. And if you had a length of 8 divided by 2 is 4, and that's fine. In the case of these examples, how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. So there were 7 here, right? In our case, we took 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. We know that's going to get truncated and go down to 3. So, and that's what we want, right? We just want to check these first 3, and they're going to be paired up with the 3 on the end. And we can ignore the 2. It's like a pivot point. it doesn't need to be analyzed. It's in the middle in the case of odds. And then it works out fine. Consider that we have 4. We're going to divide that by 2. We're going to get 2. And we're going to check 2 numbers. 2 from the front against 2 from the back. So that's how that works out. Then I'll make my loop for 0I is less than num compares. Increment I at each point. We're going to go through half. Now we're going to check each character of the string in turn. And we can access those characters from a string. We know that it's a collection of chars. So let's say if num text, our string, right, at index I, this is going to grab from the front, is not equal to num text at index, let's take the length. Remember, these are 0 based, so length would actually go 1 over. To get the last element, I have to subtract 1. And then additionally, to keep up with our index in the loop here, I'm going to subtract I further. So at the first iteration, right, we're going to grab num text 0, and we're going to grab num text length minus 1 minus 0. So it's just length, it's just the last element. But you can see as I increments, it's going to incrementally move backward from the end of the array of the collection each time. So that's sort of, we're pairing up numbers from the front and the back. If they're not equal at any point, I know I can return false. This is that short circuit kind of thing I'm talking about. If the first digits don't even match, there's no point in analyzing the rest of the string, because even if they match perfectly, it's still false. So it's just wasted processing. So just get out of here, return false. Provided that you do all these pairings and they're all equal, you sort of survive the for loop here. You don't hit that return false condition. You can assume that everything worked out correctly. And I think this will work. We'll run it to be sure. And yeah, we had a pass there. So, very well could have done this another way. Please share that if you did. Otherwise, the weird thing with this is probably how I was indexing off the back too, and then sort of imagining how as I increases, it's moving from the last element to 1 away from the last element to 2 away from the last element, etc. And that as it's grabbing ordered characters from the front of the array, and they're sort of both headed towards the middle of the string, and that's sort of, they're being paired up and checked that way. Hopefully that's clear enough. Otherwise, you know what to do. Type your questions in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll be on to the next challenge. We'll see you.